Hello guys, welcome to the Parsons series, and we had already started with the topic of glaucoma. We had seen the general concepts of glaucoma. Now today we are going to start with the primary open angle glaucoma, and I think this is the most important glaucoma because it is the most common also clinically. When you are seeing the patients of the glaucoma, this is the most common type of glaucoma that you come across. Now if you look at these patients, this characteristically has an adult onset and it is bilateral, almost symmetrical. Now when they say almost symmetrical, that largely means it is asymmetrical, means we do not get exactly similar changes in cases of the glaucoma in both the eyes. Ocular examination will show the open anterior chamber angle, glaucomatous optic nerve changes, visual field defects and intraocular pressure more than 21 recorded on at least few occasions. So obviously when I'm talking of glaucoma, I have got one thing in my mind, and that is the triad. We had discussed about the triad in the previous sessions, yes. So I will require three things here. One will be the raised intraocular pressure, then we have the optic disc changes, and the third is the visual field defects. So obviously if I'm saying that this patient is having glaucoma, I'm expecting most of these. So if the IOP is more than 21, if I am having the optic disc changes, the visual field defects in the patient, and the angle is open, because if with these things angle closure is there, then I'll say it is the angle closure type of glaucoma. Then this type of glaucoma is the open angle, where I'm getting this triad along with the open angle. Okay, now as I say that this is the commonest form of glaucoma in the Caucasians and the Africans, and they are constituting about half of the primary glaucoma seen in the Asians and the Eskimos. So are half of the glaucomas, okay, earlier they used to say it is 1/3, but now they are saying that half of the primary glaucomas which are found in the Asians is your primary open angle glaucoma. So if I talk about India, okay, it is half. Then it is occurring in the elderly people and rarely seeing earlier than 40 years of age. So that means now they have lowered down the age also. A patient having a glaucoma will be an elderly patient, and it's very unlikely that the age will be less than 40. So more than 40 we can expect it, and then it is running in the families. It is hereditary, inheritance is multifactorial, polygenic, and we'll talk about the genes also which are contributing. All the genetic analysis in some families with a juvenile open angle glaucoma has identified a specific link to the long arm of chromosome number 1. So this we will be talking in great detail when we will be reaching to the genetics of ophthalmology. Okay, so these patients who are having this glaucoma are inheriting a number of the abnormal genes, and these genes appear to influence the height of the intraocular pressure, what is the facility of the outflow, what is the CD ratio, and then you have got other risk factors also. So if I talk about the risk factors, the age more than 40 years, it is equal in males and females, yes. Then we have got the hereditary predisposition. It is again an important component. There are certain genes which are associated, like we have optineurin, we have got myocilin, right? And then we also have the diabetes and myopia. Now glaucoma is found to be more frequent in such people who are having diabetes, myopia, hypertension, thyrotoxicosis, retinal vascular diseases, smoking, in comparison to the general population. Now intraocular pressure of less than 21. If I am having an intraocular pressure which is less than 21, it is recorded repeatedly in about 15% of patients with all other features of open angle glaucoma, and this is nothing but the normal tension glaucoma. Now recently in the INI CT examination also there was a question on ocular hypertension. They have a trend on asking the glaucoma, especially with the open angle. So in that category we have got the open angle glaucoma, the normal tension glaucoma, as well as the ocular hypertension. So what they are saying that out of all, 15% of the patients will be on normal tension glaucoma. Normal tension glaucoma means the IOP is normal even though I have the optic disc changes and I have the visual field defects, alright. Now some individuals physiologically have an intraocular pressure which is more than 21 without optic nerve head changes, without the field abnormalities. Now these are the patients which are called as the ocular hypertensives. So if you remember when we talked about this triad, this is your triad. So at least two at least 2 of the 3 criteria should be present in order to call it as glaucoma. So if I do not have all 3 of them, at least I should have 2 of them, then I can say it is a glaucoma. So what they are saying, if I have got the optic disc changes and the visual field defects, I have got 2 of them, but I do not have this raised intraocular pressure, it is glaucoma because 2 changes are there, but I cannot say that it's a normal glaucoma because IOP is normal. In that case, I will say it's a normal tension glaucoma or it's a low tension glaucoma. In the other variety, when they are saying that I have got just raised intraocular pressure, I do not have optic disc changes, I do not have the visual field defects, then I cannot call it as glaucoma at one criteria. In that case, I will call it as the ocular hypertension. Then that will be called as the ocular hypertension. So there is a slight difference between a glaucoma, normal tension glaucoma, as well as the ocular hypertension. I hope this is very, very clear. And 15% of the patients are actually having the normal tension glaucoma. Now, the patients with the optic nerve head changes and suggestive of glaucoma but without a raised intraocular pressure or the visual field changes, these are called as the suspects. There is another term which is the open angle glaucoma suspect. Suspects means, suppose they say that one of them, like if I was having one of them of the triad that was only the raised intraocular pressure, then it was the ocular hypertension. Now take another situation where I have got this IOP, I have got the optic disc changes and the visual field defects. Now they are saying that I have got just this optic disc changes which are suggestive of the glaucoma without a raised intraocular pressure, without the field changes. Now what to say these patients? We have discussed the other thing. Then they say that these patients are the suspects. If I am having the optic disc changes which are very, very evident of the glaucoma, then I will say that these are suspects because they are not having a raised intraocular pressure, they are not having the visual field defects. Alright. Now let us talk about the pathogenesis. See, if I talk about the pathogenesis, the rise in intraocular pressure is actually related to the increased resistance to the outflow of the aqueous at the trabecular meshwork, and that too at the juxtacanalicular region. See, there can be 2 reasons of glaucoma. Yes, whenever I have got a raised intraocular pressure, right, most of the times we have the glaucoma due to the raised intraocular pressure. Now if I have this raised intraocular pressure, you have to understand that I will have more of aqueous humor. Yes. Now this more of aqueous humor can be due to 2 reasons, either there is more formation or there is less drainage. So most of the times it is due to the less drainage. Whenever I have got less drainage of this aqueous humor, I will have glaucoma, and you know that 90% of this drainage is taking place through the trabecular meshwork. 90% is through this trabecular meshwork. So that is why the most common cause of this glaucoma is actually when I am having the resistance at the level of trabecular meshwork. Now if you look at the pathway from this trabecular meshwork, suppose this is your trabecular meshwork which is present at the angle of anterior chamber, where it is going? It is going to a oval canal which is called as a Schlem's canal. From there it is going to the aqueous vein, and from there it is going to the episcleral vein. This is the route. Now the juxtacanalicular meshwork is the area where I am having maximum resistance to the flow of aqueous humor. What does this mean? This means that the area of this trabecular meshwork, if you can see here, the area of this trabecular meshwork which is actually opening into the Schlem's canal, that is juxtacanalicular, that is near the canal, and that is giving us the maximum resistance to the flow of aqueous humor. So that is why whenever we are doing surgery, we are giving incisions, we are giving the opening, that too we are giving at the opening of this trabecular meshwork to the Schlem's canal. The reason is pretty simple, that this area is giving you the increased resistance to the outflow at the level of the juxtacanalicular meshwork. In part, this can be due to the trabecular sclerosis. Trabecular sclerosis, and this sclerosis is actually the age related changes, and that is why we say that the most common reason why we get the outflow in the aqueous humor, this blockade in the flow of aqueous humor at the level of the trabecular meshwork in cases of open angle glaucoma is due to the sclerosis. Sclerosis means we have got thickening at the level of the trabecular meshwork. Okay. Now we talk about the clinical features. Now again, clinical features are important because you know this open angle glaucoma is very, very similar in presentation as that of the cataract. So whenever a patient of elderly age group, maybe a male, maybe a female, is coming with the gradual paleness, progressive diminution of vision, the two things that at once strike our mind is the senile cataract and this open angle glaucoma. So you have to actually, take note of those features which are same in the both the conditions and those features which are actually different also, so that you get to know that whether it's cataract or whether it's glaucoma. So they say that it is generally asymptomatic in the beginning and patients will have the non-specific complaints. Now because this is a progressive condition, a very gradual condition, so usually you do not have any specific signs, just the non-specific one. So the non-specific things that we can have is a headache, frequent change in the presbyopic correction, noticing a blind spot or scotoma, especially if it is present in the inferior part of the field, and difficulty in the dark adaptation. Now let us see them one by one. What is the basis of these changes actually, why we are having these symptoms? The reason is that this patient is basically having the increased intraocular pressure. Pressure is very high. Now due to this pressure, what is having, there is a problem with the ciliary muscle. There may be ischemic changes in this ciliary muscle, so muscle is not able to act to its fullest power, and therefore there will be difficulty in accommodation. There will be difficulty in the accommodation. Now because we have got difficulty in accommodation, what is going to take place? There will be problem with the presbyopic correction. So a very important thing, while in cases of the cataract we have got the frequent changes in the distance correction, here I am having the frequent changes in the presbyopic correction. We are having a blind spot or the scotoma that is present in the inferior field. We are also having difficulty in the dark adaptation because usually we have got scotomas which are extending from the periphery towards the center. So in the periphery also what cells we have got? We have got rods, and these rods are affected, which are leading to difficulty in the dark adaptation. Alright, now to make a diagnosis of open angle glaucoma, even if you are having a normal or open angle confirmed by the gonioscopy. Okay, how to make a diagnosis of open angle glaucoma? You have confirmed that the angle is open, and obviously that will be confirmed with the gonioscopy. So what could be there? So we have got the optic disc changes, we have got visual field effects, we will see that. So if you look at the optic disc changes, what are the changes that we are going to get in cases of glaucoma? So if you see the normal optic disc, you will have a reddish optic disc that will be circular in color, shape, and reddish or pinkish in color, and then we have got a cup shaped depression in the center. Now actually why do we have this cup shaped depression in the center? If you remember, I told you before also, it is something like this because one of the layer of the retina continues to form this optic nerve. So suppose this is a sclera, and through the sclera this optic nerve fibers are coming out. Actually it is the nerve fiber layer of the retina which is coming out through the sclera. So we have got so many fibers here, 1 million fibers, or specifically speaking 1.2 million fibers. So these million fibers are going. So they are making perforations in the sclera and they are going out. And in the center we have got this hollow depression. Can you see this? In the center we have got this hollow depression. So actually this hollow depression is actually called as a cup, where I do not have any fiber, and that is why if you look at the nomenclature, this is your cup and this is your disc, right? And what is the CD ratio? What is the CD ratio? Means what is the ratio of the diameter of the cup upon the diameter of the disc. So this is actually the diameter of the cup upon the diameter of the disc. Something like this you have to go, which is about 3 or 4 by 10. Now what does this mean? That means if I divide this whole of the disc into 10 parts. So out of this, cup will occupy only 3 parts or 4 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. So that means, can you see how many parts are there? We have got 1, 2, 3 and 4, and total is 10. So this is 4 by 10. So this becomes 0.4. So it could be 3 or 4. From there we get actually the optic disc CD ratio. Then you have got something which is this. What is this? This is actually the nerve fiber layer thickness. So this is called as the neuroretinal rim. This is called as the neuroretinal rim. So even if you are a beginner and you are seeing this session, I think now it must be very clear to you that when I talk about the CD ratio, what does it mean? What is the neuroretinal rim and what is the CD ratio? What is cup? What is disc? And something like this. So what they say that when I am having, when I am having a CD ratio which is more than 0.5, then I am thinking about the glaucoma. Normal is 0.3 or 0.4. So if I am having, but that does not mean that if the person does not have any changes and just the CD ratio 0.5, that means glaucoma. Obviously, it's a combined approach. I will have to see all the things, only then I can label the person as glaucoma. Then asymmetry. Whenever there is an increase in the CD ratio, then this is actually called as cupping. Increase in the CD ratio is called as a cupping, and this cupping is actually asymmetrical. We have got asymmetrical cupping. We have got asymmetrical cupping. Asymmetrical cupping means when I have got difference between the two eyes, that should be more than 0.2. That means if one eye is having 0.6 and another is having 0.9, then it is considered to be asymmetrical. But one is having 0.6 and one is having 0.7, that will not be considered to be asymmetrical. Narrowing, notching or the pallor of the neuroretinal rim. Now obviously, as you know, size of this cup will increase. So the cup size will increase in the vertical direction more than the horizontal direction, because there is first loss of superior and inferior fibers. See, what do you mean by atrophy? Atrophy means that the fibers of the optic disc are getting affected, getting ischemic, and they are dying. How they are dying? By the apoptosis. So when they are dying, this hollow will increase. So the shape of this hollow will be vertically oval. So obviously when the size of this cup will increase, what is happening? There will be narrowing of this neuroretinal rim, pallor of the neuroretinal rim or the notching. So this will go hand in hand. We will have the changes where I am having the increased size of the cup, I have got cupping, I have got vertically oval cupping, I have got asymmetrical cupping, difference of at least 0.2, and I also have the narrowing of the neuroretinal rim. Then the other things, we will also have the disc hemorrhages. These hemorrhages are called as the splinter hemorrhages. We also have the splinter hemorrhages. We have the abnormalities of the blood vessels suggestive of the acquired enlargement of the optic cup. So we are also having some changes in the vessels that we will be discussing. We will have the nasalization of the vessels, bioknitting sign. So we have got vertically oval cupping, and because cup looks as if it is engrossed deep inside the disc, that is why ultimately it leads to the cavernous optic atrophy. And one of the causes of the enlargement of the blind spot is also considered to be open angle glaucoma. Now what is enlargement of the optic disc? Let's talk about this, though it is from neuro-ophthalmology, but it is also associated with glaucoma. See what happens due to the optic disc. Let me show you. Suppose this is your eyeball. Okay, this is your eyeball, and we have got this optic nerve on the nasal side, something like this. And I'll divide this into two parts. This is your nasal retina and this is your temporal retina. Now this is your optic nerve, right? Now this part is your optic disc. Optic disc is nothing but the optic nerve head which you are seeing from the front, and this area is a hollow which is not forming any image. Now this nasal retina will correspond to the temporal visual field. This will be corresponding to the temporal visual field, while temporal retina will be corresponding to the nasal visual field. Okay, if you look here. So what is going to take place? This optic disc which is present in the nasal retina will actually lead to the blind spot, one area where the person cannot see anything, no images formed, and that will be in the temporal field, right? Now this blind spot actually therefore corresponds to the size of the optic disc. So if I have increased size of the optic disc, there will be increase in the blind spot. So that is called as enlargement of the blind spot. That is called as the enlargement of blind spot. So this was a question that was actually asked in AIIMS, that all of the following are the causes of enlargement of blind spot except. So there they give the options. One was your papilledema. Papilledema means there is a edema of the optic disc. So obviously I will have increase in the size of the optic disc, therefore increase in the size of the blind spot. Number 2 was your medulated optic disc. Medulated optic disc means normally what happens that the myelinated fibers are coming from the brain, they are just stopping at the lamina cribrosa. Lamina cribrosa, I hope you remember, the area of the sclera through which the optic nerve fibers comes out. Now in cases of the myelinated optic nerve fibers or the medulated optic disc fibers, it is going up, inside also, and they are forming a sheath around the optic disc. That will again give you an impression that there is an increase in the size of the optic disc and there will be enlargement of the blind spot. Number 3 was your open angle glaucoma. Now, so in the open angle glaucoma, there is a apparent increase. There is an apparent increase in the size of the blind spot, not the real increase. It gives an impression due to the increased size of the cup. It gives an impression that there is enlargement of the optic disc that will lead to the increase in the size of the blind spot. And 4th was your hypoplastic optic disc. Hypoplastic optic disc. Now hypoplastic means there will be decrease in the size of the optic disc. We are having small size optic disc, so obviously you will not get the enlargement of the blind spot here, and that was the answer. So I hope now you have understood why glaucoma was not the answer. Even I'll not take the name. I have seen certain faculties have also told this answer, that the answer is open angle glaucoma there. I am not convinced with it, because one of the options was also the hypoplastic optic disc. So certainly hypoplasia means smaller size of the optic disc, and that will certainly not give you the enlargement of blind spot. Okay. Alright. Now records of the appearance of the optic disc over many years are imperative for the review and the treatment of the patients, which can be in the form of drawing, photographs, stereo photographs, topography, or a cello, or it can be OCT. Now what they are saying, that only one time when you are seeing the changes, they may not be sufficient to start the treatment. Obviously you will have to review these changes from the previous ones. You will have to compare that whether or not these changes have taken place. Okay. Only then you will label this patient as a patient of the open angle glaucoma. So obviously many things are important. You must see all the changes of the optic disc here. Now the vessel changes they mentioned, but they have not told you. So let's see the vessel changes also. So what happens, suppose this is your optic disc here, and I am going to make a large cup because we are dealing with the patient of glaucoma here. So this patient of glaucoma, earlier it was like this, and now there is an increase in the size of the cup, and it was a vertically oval cupping because of the selective loss of the fibers first in the superior and the inferior direction. That is why we have got vertically oval cup. Now what happens, we have got a central retinal artery which is giving you 4 end arteries, something like this. We have got 4 end arteries. So 2 are on the nasal side, supranasal and infranasal, and 2 on the temporal side, supratemporal and the infratemporal are there. Now what is happening? There is an increase in the size of this optic cup. Okay, so slowly and gradually these vessels, you know, they are actually moving towards the nasal side. So when they are moving towards the nasal side, they are bending. They are taking a bend from the temporal side and going towards the nasal side. So how they are doing it? If you see, they are bending, going backward, moving on the optic disc surface. Can you see this? they are again coming out and bending towards the nasal side. Here also they are going back, they are moving on the surface of the optic disc on the posterior side, coming out and bending. So it is something like this, something like this. Can you see? So you have got double bending. One bend is present here, one bend is present here. So this is called as double bending. Either I can call it as double bending, or it is also called as Z bending due to the shape. It is called as the double bending or the Z bending. This is also called as the nasal shifting. This is also called as the nasal shifting of the blood vessels, and due to this, right, due to this it looks like a shape of a bayonet. So this is also called as the bayoneting sign. This is also called as the bayoneting sign. So we have got the double bending or the Z bending, the nasal shifting of the blood vessels, and the sign is called as a bayoneting sign, where it looks as if the vessels are broken off because they are bending on the posterior surface of the optic disc. You cannot see them from the anterior side. So on the anterior side they are hidden. So this area is not seen, right? This area you cannot see. When you cannot see this area, what is happening? You can see it only here. So it looks as if this area, this much area is broken. That is why it is called as bayoneting sign. Alright. Now next we come to the what you called as the visual field changes. Visual field changes consistent with the glaucomatous defects means as more and more optic nerve fibers are going on affecting, obviously the visual field will also constrict. So if I show you a brief one, suppose this was your visual field. Suppose this was the visual field. Okay, I have made it horizontally oval because there was a selective loss of superior and inferior fibers, and what we are left is the horizontal field, and then we have this central field also. Suppose this is the total one, we have got the total peripheral field, and this is the central field. So when it starts affecting, you know, when we have got the scotomas, these scotomas are actually starting from the periphery. So the person, you know, starts having the blindness in the periphery, and he could see only in the center, something like this, only in the center. Then this is also going, then this is also going, this is also going, this is also going. So slowly and gradually the field is constricting, and in the periphery we have got rods. Rods will affect the dark adaptation. It will affect the dim light vision, and slowly whole of this peripheral field is gone. This whole of this peripheral field gone. Now when whole of this peripheral vision is gone, what will be left? The person will be having only the central vision. Now this person when having only the central vision, it would look something like this. So when this person is seeing the things, he could see only in the center. This kind of a vision is actually called as the tunnel vision. This kind of vision is actually called as the tunnel vision or the tubular vision, as if the person is seeing through a tunnel or a tube. As if the person is seeing through this tunnel or a tube, so this person can see only in the center, not in the peripheral area. This is called as a tunnel vision or the tubular vision. So as you know, the visual field defects will progress. Obviously this person will have more and more central vision left, and it will come under the DD of tunnel vision or tubular vision. So optic disc changes and the visual field defects will go hand in hand. Alright. Now next we move to the IOP. If I talk about the IOP, more than 21 mm or more than one occasion, there could be asymmetry of the IOP, more than 5 mm between the two eyes. Now here actually they are talking about the diurnal variation. They are talking about the diurnal variation. Now what is this diurnal variation? As the name suggests, this is diurnal. So normally also if you take the IOP of a person at 2 times of the single day, one in the morning, one in the evening, then we will have a difference. This is called as a diurnal variation. Now normal, if I am talking about the normal diurnal variation, then this is up to 5 mm of mercury. Normal is only up to 5 mm of mercury. If I am having within this, then it's normal. If it is something between 5 to 8, then this is called as the borderline. Okay, I cannot consider it to be glaucomatous, I cannot consider it to be normal. And if it is more than 8, then it is actually, you know, characteristic or diagnostic of the primary open angle glaucoma. So this is again very, very important that we can even diagnose this open angle glaucoma on the basis of the exaggerated difference in the diurnal variations. Alright. Now if I talk about the retinal nerve fiber layer. Okay, so let's talk about the retinal nerve fiber layer. We can also have the defects in the retinal nerve fiber layer, and why? Because nerve fiber layer is the layer which is continuing to form the optic nerve. You can see this changes very easily with the help of RNFL, OCT, optical coherence topography we can do, and of which layer, RNFL layer we are doing, we can easily see. And what we are doing it from the two poles, the superior pole and the inferior poles, from the superior and the inferior poles, and they are best done after the dilatation of the pupil. So usually these people are sent for the OCT RNFL to see the thickness of this layer and what are the differences, how much layer has been thinned out, especially from the superior and inferior pole, and then we see in the red free filter. All right. Now after you have made all these things, you have made the diagnosis, now we will come to the management part. Now looking at the management part, see, the damage to the optic nerve is irreversible. I think this is the most important aspect of this disease, that it is irreversible. So though it is less common than the cataract, but more severe, because every part of the vision which is gone through due to the cataract can come back. But even 1% visual acuity which is decreased and affected by the glaucoma will not come back. And therefore it is imperative to detect the glaucoma early so that visual morbidity can be avoided. Patients at the risk of glaucoma like the first degree relatives, the diabetics, the myopes, they should undergo regular screening after the age of 40 years. So basically every person who is more than 40 should always be screened to rule out glaucoma, where the things are unavoidable and not curable, okay, which are neither preventable nor avoidable and not curable, we can say. These things should always be undergoing the regular screening. So any person who is more than 40 years have the risk of glaucoma and should be properly screened for. Now as it is chronic, it is insidious, the patient requires close follow-up throughout the life. You have to carry on it. A good baseline evaluation, record of all the parameters. Now what are the things that you have to look in the screening? You have to look for the intraocular pressure, the perimetry, optic nerve head evaluation, gonioscopy over the years. So if they ask you what are the things that one should do in order to evaluate the glaucoma, IOP also, optic disc changes also, the visual field defects ke liye perimetry, right? Then the gonioscopy. Gonioscopy we have added in order to see the angle also. Now repeated gonioscopic examination would identify the eyes in which the use of miotics or the age-related thickening of the lens causes narrowing of the angle. Repeatedly gonioscopy, why I want to do it? Suppose I have done gonioscopy one time, I have seen that this angle is open, then why I wanted to see the gonioscopy again and again? Because I want to see that because of the glaucoma, if I am using the miotics again and again, or there is a age-related thickening of the lens, that is also causing narrowing of angle. So these factors have to be ruled out. Now glaucomatous damage generally tends to occur over the years and not the days, okay, or the weeks. So we have actually the time, ophthalmologists have a time to intervene, modify and slow the progression of this disorder. So the good thing is that it is not sudden. It will not occur in days, it will not occur in weeks, it requires months and years. So if you have screened it and you have found out that there are certain changes, we have got the risk factors also. So we have the time to modify the disease and we can slow down the progression of the disease. The following important features should be documented. The intraocular pressure should be recorded at the initial presentation, okay, is probably that at which the damage of the optic nerve had started, okay. Then what is the extent of the optic nerve damage and any associated risk factors. So you will have to actually keep a note of the IOP at which the changes have started. So because we have to decide the target therapy, what should be our goal therapy, the target therapy to decrease the IOP, so that below which the further changes do not take place. So how we are able to decide what should be the target IOP? For that I require the IOP at which the changes started. Then what was the extent of those changes? And third, if any risk factor is also present. So these parameters will help the ophthalmologist to determine a range of intraocular pressure which is not likely to progress, and you will get a target pressure. So that is what I was saying, the target goal for the initiation of the treatment you will get from there. Long-term studies have shown that if the intraocular pressure is maintained less than 16 to 18, it actually leads to stabilization of open angle glaucoma. So most of the times our target pressure will be lesser than 16 mm of mercury. Okay, now after you have set the goal, we'll start with the treatment. Treatment options present available only lower the intraocular pressure. Okay, now we had got three things in the disease. We were having the raised intraocular pressure, we were having the optic disc changes, we were having the visual field defects. But amongst the treatment, amongst the management, we have got only that thing present which can decrease the intraocular pressure. So the medicines we have got the lasers and we have got surgery. Now this decrease in the intraocular pressure could be done with the help of anti-glaucoma drugs. Okay, recently we had conducted the integrated lecture also on the anti-glaucoma drugs. Okay, so anti-glaucoma drugs again is a very important thing. We can do it by laser, we can do it by surgery, but it is actually the medicines that remains the primary mode of the treatment. So the medical and surgical therapies to lower the intraocular pressure are similar, and they are describing it in the last. Okay, now what they say that the medications such as bitoxolol are thought to increase the perfusion of the optic nerve head. There are currently no drugs proven to have any efficacy in protecting the ganglionic cells. Now there is a lot of limitations in the treatment of glaucoma. We do not have so many drugs which are helping the neuroprotection. We do not have any drugs which are acting on the ganglionic cells. Now we know that glaucoma is a multifactorial optic neuropathy which is characterized by the retinal ganglionic cell death. Means in the glaucoma we have the retinal ganglionic cell death. So obviously we would require certain drugs which will be acting on the level of these ganglionic cells, but we do not have. Okay, so basically the treatment that is available in the glaucoma is very limited. The role of these drugs is very limited. They are just acting on decreasing the intraocular pressure. Now decreasing the intraocular pressure means decreasing the aqueous humor. Decreasing the aqueous humor means decreasing the formation or increasing the outflow. So basically the drugs which are helping in the glaucoma are the drugs which are either decreasing the formation of the aqueous humor, jisme we will have the alpha adrenergic drugs, we have the beta blocker drugs, we have got the carbonic anhydrase inhibitors, or we have got the diuretics. Then we have got those drugs which are increasing the outflow. Increasing the outflow may like we are having the prostaglandin analogues which are acting on the uveoscleral outflow and like this. So laser therapy is also there. In the laser we have got the laser trabeculoplasty. In this procedure what we are doing, we are applying the laser spots. So these laser spots are applied on the trabecular meshwork, laser and trabeculoplasty. So we are applying the laser spots on the trabecular meshwork, and we know that the trabecular meshwork is a part of the angle of anterior chamber, so we have to give it gonioscopically. So what we are doing, we are actually doing the coagulation of the collagen there. So due to this we are increasing the space available for the aqueous. So we are opening out, we are burning that collagen, so that sclerosis is opened and we are having increased space for the flow of the aqueous humor. It has also been observed that the endothelial cells will migrate to cover the areas that have been subjected to laser therapy. It will change its biochemical properties. Now what are the lasers that we can use here? The lasers that can be used is argon laser, diode laser, or the frequency doubled Nd:YAG laser. And in order to cover this trabecular meshwork, how many spots we are giving? The spots that are given is about 50 to 100 spots, and how much area we are applying? It is 180 to 360 degree we are applying. And what is the size of these spots? Size of the spot is just 50 micron size. So argon laser, diode laser, frequency doubled Nd:YAG. What is Nd:YAG? Nd:YAG is a neodymium yttrium aluminium garnet, and this is having a wavelength of 1064 nanometer. Now because this is frequency doubled, when you are doubling the frequency, the wavelength will be half, so this will be by 2. So this becomes 532 nanometers. We can use these lasers. What is the mechanism of action? They are causing, mechanism of action is your photocoagulation. It is the photocoagulation of the trabecular meshwork collagen, so that we are increasing the aqueous outflow. Okay, so these laser spots, where they are applied? They are applied at the junction of the anterior and posterior trabecular meshwork, so that we are producing the blenching of the tissues. And mostly what happens, that there will be increase in the intraocular pressure. See, it is followed by a transient increase in the intraocular pressure, and therefore we require the prophylactic treatment. Now again a very important question, what prophylactic treatment you are going to use? So most commonly we use here is the apraclonidine. Most commonly what we use here is the apraclonidine eye drop. This apraclonidine is a selective alpha adrenergic drug, and mostly it is used before the procedures, you know, which are associated with the increase in the intraocular pressure. We are not using it as a maintenance therapy. Then there is a thing which is called as a selective laser trabeculoplasty. Now what is this selective laser trabeculoplasty? This is selectively doing at the trabecular meshwork, so it is producing less damage, and the intraocular pressure management is same. The intraocular pressure will fall by average 5 to 7 mm of mercury, but slowly and gradually the effect will diminish. Laser trabeculoplasty do not adequately control the intraocular pressure or if patients are not compliant or do not want surgery. So basically, you know, this is only causing the transient decrease in the intraocular pressure and very small amount, 5 to 7. That is why laser trabeculoplasty is not used for the treatment. It is mainly used as a prophylaxis for the control in the fellow eye. So what is the treatment of choice as a prophylaxis in the fellow eye? It is actually laser trabeculoplasty. Now you have to be very careful. The treatment of choice for the prophylaxis, you know, in cases of open angle glaucoma and in cases of angle closure glaucoma. In cases of open angle glaucoma, it is this laser trabeculoplasty, while in cases of angle closure glaucoma, it is a laser iridotomy. Okay. So this is your, if you see argon laser trabeculoplasty, you can see the blenched dots. Can you see? These are actually given in the trabecular meshwork in order to cause the laser trabeculoplasty. So this was the entire open angle glaucoma from the Parsons perspective, and I tried my best to explain you the terms and what is they trying to say, so that you have a clear idea. Now even if you have notes, okay, it will always give you an edge if you read the standard textbook, and if you are in the third year, I think this is the ideal time, then it will be a boon for you people. Keep on reading the Parsons along with me, and don't worry if you are a final year student or intern preparing, then again you can quickly go through it. You don't have to, you know, invest so much of time reading Parsons by yourself, and you will quickly have the pearls of the Parsons too. Thank you and happy ophthalmology.